Hello, and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Before we get started, you can find us at all the social medias Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as One Geek 411. Come chat with us at our Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com and check out our show notes on our website, onegeek411.com. Catch our live podcast show on Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time and find all our videos over at YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our sweet, sweet merch at our Redbubble store. Hi, I'm Shanine, and with me, I've got Emma.
Heyo.
How's it going?
Going good. How's it going for you?
Oh, it's going.
I would like to note that in the show notes for tonight is the non-American way to spell favorite with a U, courtesy of Shanine, and I quite enjoy it.
You mean where they botched all English and added Latin random letters to words and kept them?
You mean like regular English?
Making it sound fancy.
They did that
now, so.
They also did that with the Latin S for like Germanic words and.
Okay. And also we have Sassy Chris with us tonight.
I'm just saying.
Chris is just sassy because he got teased earlier.
Yeah. Fun to tease Chris.
And Cameron.
Hello.
All right. So tonight we are talking Binti by Nnedi Okorafor.
I don't know if you can see it. It's behind me, but my headphone string's too short.
And also Binti Home, book 1 and book 2 in the trilogy.
Which is almost like a whole book.
Yeah.
Yes, they are both very short, which is nice sometimes.
Yep.
So
can confirm they are short. You can read them in a day.
Yep.
Did you read them both in a day?
No, I'd mostly finished Binti before our January book club that we ended up not having, and then yesterday and part of today I read Binti Home.
I mean, it is Black History Month, so this book makes sense to have here. Maybe, kind of. I don't know. Maybe.
Also, great book.
Does make sense. And yes, good book.
All right, so here is a synopsis. 2 synopsises.
Synopsi.
Is
this a Greek, Latin, or?
That's why it's octopuses and not octopi, because it's Greek it's a Greek origin. Okay, anyway, Shanine, continue.
All right, in the novella Binti, we follow Binti, a mathematical harmonizer who leaves her home against her family's wishes to travel across space to the universe's greatest university. On her trip to the university, the ship is attacked by an alien race known as the Meduse, leaving only the pilot and Binti alive. She is mysteriously able to communicate with them through an ancient device and must negotiate between the Meduse and the university planet to avoid bloodshed and save her own life. And in Binti Home, we follow Binti back to Earth. She's been studying her ancient device at the university and has so far been unable to uncover its secrets. She is also dealing with a lot of PTSD and anger. She goes home to participate in a pilgrimage that women from her culture go on in an attempt to fix what she believes is wrong with her. And Okwu, her Meduse friend, accompanies her. Things do not go as planned, and Binti learns more about her ancestors and herself.
Do things not go as planned? Wow. Understatement.
No, they do not go well.
Nothing ever goes as planned. Also, here are some fun facts. I did some Googling. The Himba, which is the group that Binti comes from, are a real indigenous group from Namibia. And they do, in fact, cover their skin and hair in ochres, as we see in the novels, which is a mixture of butterfat and ochre pigment, as well as aromatic resins to protect themselves from the harsh desert climate. Also, hair designs do differ between groups and are significant and socially symbolic.
That's super cool.
Also, Himba are animists, which means they believe in the spiritual essence of all creatures, places, and objects and worship their god and their ancestors, which we see a little bit in the novels as well. And then a little bit about the author. Nnedi Okorafor was born in Ohio to Igbo Nigerian parents and spent many holidays in Nigeria. So
I think is a doctor based on her Twitter, or I just tagged the complete wrong person.
I think you tagged the wrong person.
He holds a PhD in English and is
Okay.
an associate professor of creative writing.
Okay.
So yes, technically she is a doctor, just
PhD
not
doctor.
that kind of doctor.
Is she the kind of doctor that demands you address her as doctor?
I mean, anyone with a doctorate should be able to demand that.
Yeah.
No.
Feel like we've already given some first impressions. Do we have any other zinger first impressions to add?
I mean, I quite enjoyed it.
I wish meditating on math gave me powers.
Yeah. I think we can all say that to some extent.
Especially
Although I'm terrible at math, so
basic
I was
math.
gonna say I would not like to ever meditate on math. So
If you
that's
could-
not
What if
me.
it gave you powers?
if you could pick an
It would be
area
hard, though.
of knowledge to
I
Would
mean,
I
like
have powers
meditate
if I'm
on,
bad at it?
She never actually like calculates anything in her meditations. Just like formulas: a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
But she's like doing math with them.
I mean, yeah, because she's meditating on the formula, and then now she has the power to do the math. Like that.
I don't think that's how it worked.
I think that's how it worked.
maybe it's there's some wiggle room there for your own personal interpretation
I
of
mean,
how
she also-
exactly it works.
She's
We
also
are
been
gonna
imbued
get
with
to
the
more
power
math
of
stuff
nanites,
later.
So.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Also, not to get too into a future question, but we may get to visually see what this looks like soon.
All right. So, what was your favorite part in Binti and Binti Home?
I think for me, it was the overall reluctant development of the friendship between Binti and whatever his name is.
Okwu.
Yeah, Uoku. Just like the whole development of that, like it was very reluctant, and then we get to see how it plays out later on.
I agree. That was also a very interesting part, just because it's so complicated.
Yeah,
Like, there's a lot of negative, very scary things between them, but there's still like share this connection.
and it was pretty like it's almost the friendship version of Romeo and Juliet, but not quite. Like you've got these two individuals who are like on opposing sides, and they're put in such a weird situation that they're just like come out the other end as friends, but reluctantly at first. In such an interesting way. So that whole development was just fun to see, because there's mistrust on both sides. But then they realize it's, it is what it is.
For me, a lot of my favorite parts are when we have these like quiet moments of introspection from Binti. I really like that. While this book is definitely not humorous, there are like little like one-liners of comedy throughout it, and I really liked how those are written in to kind of this self-reflective state, and it ties in a lot with the math meditation that we get into. But there's a lot of those like little moments throughout the book that are really good. We'll talk quotes a little bit later on, but I really like those moments where we get to kind of just see what's going on in Binti's head.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I didn't care for the first book. Not gonna lie. But definitely picked up for Home. I liked seeing her interaction with her ancestral family, specifically her grandmother. Grandma's MVP.
Yeah.
To answer a future question, I'm sure.
Okay. Any least favorite parts?
There's no consequences in the first book.
I hadn't thought about that.
Besides, like, thousands of people dying.
There's no consequence for thousands of people dying. They land, oh, we'll return your stinger. Okay. Thanks for killing everyone. Good job. You can go. Oh, and now we're friends.
I mean, they're a university, not
Right.
Yeah.
galactic law enforcement.
It's not even necessarily about galactic law enforcement. It's like the entire premise was like, oh, we both of our peoples understand honor, but there's just nothing like they.
For the university, they also don't have a specific beef. Like the beef is between this group of humans and the Meduse, not the university. They're just here like, oh, sure, we took this thing. Sorry about that. Please don't kill anyone else. Like they weren't a part of this war. I mean, they just doing stuff.
They were doing what they were doing.
Taking relics from
knowing it
places you
was
shouldn't be
causing
taking
issues.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the university was the entire cause that people got slaughtered. Also.
Right.
So that was just the cause, like the people getting. It's like, okay, we're even now. Like, no, it's just no. There's just no consequence, and it's just very infuriating. And then that, like, yes, Binti's suffering from PTSD going into the second book, but she now has like this force connection. But you can be a little more resistant to that than she is. I'm just like,
That's true.
What do you mean be a little bit more resistant to that?
Like, for a year, it's not even like she avoided him. Like, on whatever the planet's name, Uni, whatever. Or anything. No, it's just like, no, this is my only friend now.
I mean, it's commonly brought up that people see her as a misfit. And so it's not that that's her only friend. It's that Okwu is the only one that sees her for being a being. Everybody else just sees her as this weird thing.
I mean, sure, but there was no resistance there into the development into that place. And maybe that's just because it's a short form, like it's a short book, but like there is nothing. It's like just immediately embrace things, except for going into the second book, acknowledging your own prejudices. Okay, I'm confused. It's like you didn't develop any prejudices against this people that you watch kill everyone on this thing, essentially transform you, and then
yeah, exactly. I think a lot of that is complicated by her being transformed into part Meduse.
And she does talk about having consequences when she sees Okwu, especially after the attack. Like when they first are on, like she talks about it. I mean, it's off screen, but she talks about it as part of her like year on the university.
Yeah, it's just such a weird thing to not further develop. further explain. It's more like a footnote, and it's like it's fine, but it's just.
I'm curious if it's in.
like,
Go ahead, Em.
I'm sure it's something the author has contemplated in at least writing these books. Just because, I mean, these books are very intentionally short. And so I'm sure it's something that was at least toyed with. But the author wanted to go a different route. But yes, like there could have been a bit more character development in that route. But at the same time, we haven't read the third book, so maybe there's something that happens in the third book that sort of ties it all in together and resolves that.
And there's also the short story that is included in our 3/4-in-1 book.
The trilogy that has 4 books.
Yes. And it takes place between book 1 and book 2. Am I the only one that read it?
I have not read it.
Okay. I won't spoil anything, but she does have other friends in that story. And there are some very visceral reactions to just triggers surrounding Okwu and the general mass murder stuff.
Good. That's all I want. That's all I'm asking.
It's out there. It exists.
It's literally in this.
Exists.
All right. Any least favorite parts from anyone else?
When we get home, I wish it was a little bit less obvious what was going to happen. Like, I really hoped that we weren't going to see this family drama unfold. And I think that's probably my least favorite part of it. Just it feels so like, oh, my family. In the first book, I told you how I'm running away and none of my people have ever left. And if I
Very
do this,
obviously.
I can never come back. Oh, I'm coming back. Look, my family's happy to see me until we get home. Now there's all this drama. Oh, yeah. And so I just wish it was a little bit less like siblings trying to guilt trip her into staying or feeling bad for having left. And it just felt a little on the nose. And I think where it ends up going with it in the latter half of Home is really interesting. But it was just like those specific, I don't know if chapters is going to be the right term, but those specific sections just felt a little like on the nose.
She's got that extra ancestry going on. But
like also on that note, like the family part kind of just emphasizes like in this, like human beings have achieved space travel and visit other planets, yet we're still terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems realistic to me.
Yeah, that's believable to me. Like, yeah.
There's still people on Earth that don't believe global warming was a thing. In this time frame, I'm sure.
Sounds about right.
Sad.
To be perfectly honest. It's sad, but I'd believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to. Well, I mean, at the same time, it also just reinforces, yeah, if I was her, I would leave too in the dead of night. And I probably wouldn't crave as much to go home as a result. So yeah, people suck back there.
Yep. Sheen, what about you? Do you have a least favorite part?
Not really. Like, I have to get really nitpicky if I'm bringing up a least favorite part. There was nothing that really stood out to me as being terrible. there was like a few instances of dialogue where I got confused about like what exactly was being said. Like there felt like a lot of subtext that I was missing, and so I'd have to read over it a few times.
I have comments on that for a later question.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's like the only thing where I was like, nah, I don't like it. Are there any standout characters for you?
Does the I mean, this goes to a later question, but does the spaceship count as a character? It's technically alive.
It is technically
Technically speaking.
Just always got to pick the animal.
What
as
else would you expect of me?
Was it addressed in the first book? Because I just don't remember it. That it was a living being.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a quote.
Okay. Like, because when I was going through the second one, like I probably just sped past it. Second one is a lot more emphatic about it. I was like, wait, what?
The first is very clear in the first book.
Yeah.
I just want to know how that works.
No, you don't.
It has air pockets that keep it alive. As Chris said earlier, for me, definitely the grandma. There's a lot going on there. And then I definitely liked math professor. And one of the things that did make me a little sad about Home being literally about her going home is that we didn't get to see as much of the university as I was hoping we would, especially since I, like I said earlier, hadn't read the 1.5. And so I really liked a lot of the characters that we kind of get teased, and I wish we would have gotten to see a bit more of that. But yeah, math professor and grandma.
Chris?
All right, I've already said grandma. Yeah,
Grandma.
Just
Grandma.
straight up. She's like
Right there.
she's also like ideal. Like she's literally the best character in the book.
Cool. I don't know. I'm a fan of Okwu. I found him
Pretty cool, too.
fascinating. He's, I don't know, they're very like analytical, like, I can't think of a proper word, but like just at a distance, removed, but there still seems to be like some underlying emotions and stuff to him. And like,
He feels like a recovering white supremacist to me.
Almost calculative, but in a less negative way, I suppose.
Yeah, I like Oku a lot as well. I think that's one of the things that I found most interesting is that like that whole dynamic of Okwu on this planet, where they're the only one there as well. Obviously, there's other humans or at the university, but yeah. But then like Okwu is the only one to come to like Earth in maybe ever, potentially just like decades. So long time.
okay, back to the ship. So let's talk about all of the sci-fi aspects. We've got the ship, space travel, funky gadgets, the astrolabes and the Adon, other planets and races, harmonizing and treeing, all that stuff.
I will say for a book that has math as a core thing, we don't actually get a lot of math. It's like we get general time frames for how, but we don't know how fast they're traveling. So we don't know how fast that fish can fly. which I want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's referenced that like it's like 12 planets away, but like obviously, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, is that like literal planets, like, or is that like,
It's like we added planets to our solar system and Earth,
or is it
and,
like there's ours, then there's this many in the next one, and then that's where it is? Like, what is it's still like super vague in that regard.
is it 12 habitable planets?
Yeah, exactly.
How many light years is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they address that it takes 3 days. And so it's like, oh, or about 3 days. And so it's like, oh, we got zoomies on this fish.
Yeah,
Real big zoomies.
Yeah.
I need to know.
For the gadgets, I really like that the astrolabes are basically just like future smartphones.
Yeah.
Like that's like the purpose. It's like, this is your ID. This is your like add your tickets into your wallet so that they can scan it at the dock. Like,
Video chat.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a video chat. It's literally just like your smartphone.
Like so much so that Binti didn't even bat an eye when someone mentioned before humans had mobile phones. It's like, who knows how far in the future this should be, but it's like, yeah, I understand the concept of mobile phones. It's not even a question.
I do also like that there is some sense of mystery with like the Eden. Like they have all this advanced technology, but there's still things that they don't understand. Because it's just like you can be so advanced that you have literal living spaceships, but there's still things from your home place that you don't understand because you just haven't put the time and resources into discovering that thing. And it's just a nice sense of mystery, even if it's not the core of the storyline. It's just like, oh, like you don't know everything about the world.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sci-fi tropes. Is the futuristic culture that's lost some portion of what technology is, and for Binti's, we find out that it's in itself alien, but
yeah,
obviously for like Eden is a general term that they use for these like types of things, and I really liked that mystery as we were going through. I really wanted it to turn out to just be something super mundane.
Yeah.
Like obviously that's not really how you write stories.
No.
But I was like, oh man, please have this be a Nokia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I was like, I want to believe like it survived. Like
it's just an old flip phone,
yeah.
you know.
Really, she just
the thing that keeps them back is the acid dripping out of the battery.
Exactly.
Like
yeah, it's the battery decaying.
Like
yeah.
I like that it played off the idea that Earth has been visited in the past, or people like civilizations have been visited in the past and been provided technology.
I'm telling you guys, the pyramids are landing platforms for aliens.
The transformer is within the pyramid.
Very specific reference there. Storms. It'll take over your mind. No. Yeah. That was a Stargate reference for people who don't get it. But yeah, it's one of my favorite tropes too in sci-fi in general and fantasy. It's just like this random thing, we don't know everything about it, and it's like no matter how far in the future you are, like no amount of technology is going to answer all of the questions of the universe.
Did you find the world and characters believable?
For the world standpoint, I feel like unfortunately, like this is kind of it's like that's kind of like what we talked about earlier, that like we're presumably super far in the future, and here we are on Earth with our exact same problems. And so there's definitely that side of it. I think with any like sci-fi, in the sense that there's all these aliens, at some degree you just have to accept that this is what it is. Like there's that suspension of disbelief. And so especially when we get to the end of Binti and then the beginning of Home, where we start to get more of descriptions of some of the aliens, it's just like, yep, you do you.
Yeah.
Like, yep. Overall, I think believable enough. There was no giant squid, but
We got
there
a
are
giant
presumably,
fish.
yeah, there's giant fish and a whole lot of things.
Jellies and
Yeah, and
other stuff.
And we have like squid people.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
every other race was described as, this one's like a jellyfish. It's like, oh, okay.
I'll take that. I mean, I guess on my end, I just want to know more about the lore of the world. Like, I found it believable, but I'm just like, I want to know, like, I want more information on this whole mathematics thing that's happening, and like what that implies and what are the rules or whatever. Like, that's more just my thing. It's like, I want to know more of how this world functions, because it's cool. It's a cool concept that's being handed out that you don't see a whole lot of, or any of at all. Like, I mean, occasionally you'll see the trope of, you know, living spaceships or whatever, in whatever capacity, but a lot of the stuff that's been presented in these books so far is super interesting, and I just want to know, like, the things behind how they work, because I'm that kind of person. I mean, the story benefits from not info dumping, but I'm just like, maybe if there was like an appendix book or whatever that you could just read through, that would be cool.
Yeah, I think she is very like brief with her world building type stuff, but she manages to paint like a very vast universe with those little nuggets of information. Like, we get a general idea of how things work and like how big the universe is. And
Yeah, unlike Cameron, I just can't bring myself to believe that we still have the same problems after knowing aliens exist.
See, Chris, this is because you're Star Trek sci-fi. Like that's your thing with it. I come at it from the other of you, where they're and so you're over here.
What's the other sci-fi that has actual aliens in, not just humans venturing out and having the same problems, but actual has aliens and interactions with aliens in it? What's the other side?
I mean, there's Star Wars, there's Mass Effect, there's oh man, I was gonna say Dragon Age, but obviously that's fantasy, like, not sci-fi.
Star Wars like has politics between the creatures, but I'm talking about like the infighting, like the direct prejudices between the same species, and that's the part I can't get past. Like, I believe, yeah, definitely, because I believe that's one reason why he's is speciesist. You know, he believes they're the superior creature, and he has a lot of pride in that. But that's species to species. That's not a ethnic group within a species against an ethnic group within a species. Because those aliens probably aren't trying to differentiate between us. Like, oh, look at all these humans. That's my point, more so. Yeah.
Again, I think that has that's a big hope for humanity that I hope is true when if that ever happens.
I know, and that's what I have to be. I have to be the idealist here, because I can't live in this future if it's still the same. It's like nothing.
Again, I have strong doubts that
I am jumping on that fish and I am leaving.
all right, so how does this compare to other science fiction you have read and experienced? Also, the math side of this reminded me of our math dragons.
Yeah, I was thinking about our
Are-
Math Dragons a lot as well.
Dragons.
Previous book club book, Seraphina.
Yes.
So we touched a little bit on some of the sci-fi elements.
I mean, overall, at least for me, it's pretty uniquely different from a lot of the sci-fi that I've read or experienced. Just because it doesn't fall into a lot of the same tropes. I mean, there are a lot of general tropes, but it's like the ones that are in there, it approaches in a different way and has the whole book, I feel like, has a bit of a different perspective on just how the future could be. And it's not super intense. Like, yes, I want lore on how the universe works, but the author made the choice to not info dump stuff on you and just decided to focus on telling the story, which was super neat. And I think that made it unique in that she was like, I don't want you guys to have to keep track of all these different random things to understand the story. I just want you to be able to focus on the story and enjoy it.
I think it's very interesting coming to this after our very recent sci-fi take on Dune, which is very much the opposite way of telling the story, where you get you're very lore heavy, very
all
deep into
of
all
the info
things.
dump.
Yeah, and so I do think it's very interesting coming to it from that opposite, the opposite end. And I'll say in general, the thing that I always look for in any like creative work is, does it leave me wanting more? And I think that as novellas, you can very much fall into that struggle of like, what's enough information? And so I liked the way that, again, comparing to Dune, that this does take a light hold on the wider lore with still making it seem interesting. And so I definitely liked that side of it. I'm also a fan. Anytime we get wonky aliens, I'm in for it. Whatever they are, sure. I believe. Let's go.
Yeah, I'll agree. I enjoyed the approach of these are just Binti's memoirs about these events that just happen to be in a futuristic setting. So it doesn't provide it because it's Binti's that's narrating and telling the story, and to her the world is already established. So it wouldn't make sense for Binti as the narrator to be going into and explaining
the entire history of the universe.
Technically, if these were actual memoirs by Binti and you're reading it in the future, you would have an understanding of how all this works. Yeah. So it makes sense. But I still want to know.
It very much reminds me of the change from the Hunger Game book to the Hunger Game movie.
Yeah.
Where in the book you get a lot of like, why would Katniss be going into this deep of thought on these things that would be established for her? Whereas in the movie, they address it as, this is the commentators on the game telling their audience, which of course is also us. And so it kind of has that same thing where I think on the other end, where Chris, to your point, she so much is just like, oh yeah, here's this thing. Okay, we're moving on. Whereas in Hunger Games, we had that, okay, we're now going to pause and tell you about Mockingjays for a chapter.
Yeah, I think comparing it to other sci-fi, like we get a lot of vast, large-scale stories, and in the universe of Binti, there would obviously be a lot of large-scale stories to tell, but it's a very personal story that we get, which is not typical for most sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Binti's about Binti. It's not about the world. Whereas most sci-fis are about the world, or like
or how a character fits into
within the setting that is this larger expanded world, I guess, the universe or galaxy, depending on how far we've developed.
Speaking of Dune and Star Wars, I found the portrayal of the desert very interesting in Binti because it's pretty much the complete opposite of any time we ever see a desert in sci-fi. In Home, she says the healing properties of the desert had always been good for me.
Mhm.
It just felt so standout that she wasn't like, oh, I hate the desert.
Mhm.
Sand.
It's
I hate
coarse
the
and gets everywhere.
sand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah. I liked that as well. Especially the way that they present their town as being like it's at this oasis. We have this salt lake. And so I think it's very interesting that we then get this like, but the thing that's interesting isn't here that we have water, it's going out into the desert that surrounds us. Even though that has its own taboos to it. But I think that that's a very interesting take.
There's just that personal connection to that journey that is so familiar. Like we can have a home, but then there's also the home that we grew up in that we also consider home, and there's something special about going back to that place where we grew up that is always gonna be part of that place and nowhere else. That like that's just kind of this vibe I got from it.
I think that speaks a lot to privilege. So like our author has spent time, in Nigeria, and we have to acknowledge that good portion of Africa is desert now, but and there's entire civilizations that thrive in that, and that's fine. Like they don't see it as, they just see that as their life. It's not something they need to overcome. It's something they've adapted and live with, and is definitely a part of like their culture has adapted and moved around it, and it's great seeing that take on it because it's a different voice, a different perspective, whereas so many of our common ones are speaking from a place of privilege. Where why would I try to live in the desert when I have access to fresh water at all times and use it to shower?
Good point. Something else that stood out to me as well was Binti felt like a very different idea of the chosen one than we're used to as well. In Home, she's having a conversation. I believe this is with like the priestess character. And the priestess says, "What will you be? Maybe it is not up to you." And I feel like even in other stories, when we have the chosen one, they still get a choice of if they will actually move into that role, if they'll be that way that people expect them to be, or in their own individual way. But this was very much like, well, maybe you don't have a choice here, and it's just happening now.
Yeah, Binti is a much more of becoming who you already were supposed to be, rather than becoming who you want to be, it seems.
Yeah.
Where it's even like the way she describes leaving for the university at night. Like it's not a choice. And she comments on that later on of, I forget the exact quote, but it's like, I didn't want to do this. And then like two sentences later, it's like, but I'm going to do it. Why is always not getting into trouble so difficult or whatever? Or why must I always do what I know like is reckless or something like that? I said, I can't remember the exact quote, but that idea that these are, it is instinctually who she is, not not this quest to become something else.
Almost already planned out ahead of her,
Mhm.
rather than her going to discover it for herself. Which is a bit of a refreshing take on that whole concept that's difficult to break away from.
Mhm.
Also, it differs because it has a bigger impact on it is that introspective aspect of Chosen. It's like you have these traits, you have all these things. This is technically, like as Cameron said, it's who are you are gonna become regardless. But there's also no that's not, it's not completely clear as to what the consequences of her not doing that are necessarily, that aren't larger, whereas the traditional hero is well, if you don't, the world ends.
Well, for Binti, if she doesn't, the whole university gets potentially killed. By whole, I mean until the Meduse get taken down. But so there definitely is that idea in the first one of, which I even think is less so this idea of her finding out who she is the whole time, but that theme comes up a whole lot more in Home. But the Chris, you were talking earlier about there not being consequences. That's kind of for me, I feel that more with Home, where we kind of go through this journey and Home ends with her it's very Empire, like Luke returning to save his friends, except we don't get to see her save her friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I'm assuming that happens in the third part, but
right. But
I'm just making assumptions here.
Right. But yeah, and so I think that is interesting that we do get air quotes big stakes at the beginning, and then
but is more so
instead of it being
out of survival and it already it's happening.
Right.
It's yeah, there are big reactions, but it's fortunately it's weird that we have the Deus Ex Machina in the first third.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Is that it's a very weird story buildup.
That trinket you kept?
Yeah. Where our very much our climax is in the first 20 pages. And then we have our falling action that we're now hanging out in as we're building up for the next big ramp. And so it's a very interesting way of taking the story in that sense.
All right. So we have a very small cast of characters in Binti compared to Home. How do you think this affected the story and the world building of the first novella? And how does it compare to the larger cast of characters in Home?
So this is what I was referencing earlier when I said I had something for a future question. I'll say in general, I feel like the fewer characters that are on the page, the better. I feel like, and even not necessarily as there are definitely some moments in Binti Home that I really enjoy, but I feel like a lot of the moments where we start to get her whole family and Shanine, you referenced this, and this what it made me think of it was the idea of you're not really sure who's saying what and what's going on. There's a little bit of that with once we get introduced to Binti's siblings, and it's okay, so there's this one. Oh, but now we're referencing this other person who has a kid, and now we're referencing these other siblings who are also here, and it just kind of becomes a bit of a jumble, or at least it did to me as I was reading. Whereas a lot of the moments that were between Binti and one to two other characters, I found very interesting. When we had those moments of smaller casts, even if there were other people around, I feel like those were some of the best moments of the novellas.
I really enjoyed in the first one just sort of getting Binti's thoughts on the whole experience, because it's pretty much just her and like two other characters at most for a good portion of the book. And you get that sort of introspectiveness of it. And I did kind of miss that in those sections in the second one, like you were saying, Cameron, where it's just sort of jumps between X number of characters that sort of gets out of hand. But I think having that sort of minimalist in the first book does sort of like lead, it gives you a sense of Binti as a character for going into the second, and just like some of the choices that were made and things like that. So
Yeah, I think I almost would have expected there to be less world building with less characters, but I feel like we still got a very rounded out world just through like Binti's thoughts and stuff like that.
And I think the way that we get the things represented through her, it's enough to keep it mysterious, but still enough to get an idea of what's going on with it still being like mysterious. Kind of like what we referenced earlier with like what is going on with this, with the harmonizing tree and stuff. Like we don't really ever get a solid explanation for that, but we kind of just get this great like introspective story of what that means to her. Yeah, I like that.
Right. I think we've touched on this a bit as well, but what does the Binti series speak to you about race?
I mean, I think one of the big things that I saw through it is that no matter what you think of yourself, you won't always know your own prejudices until you're confronted with them. Like we very much see that with the desert people, that like her own prejudices don't allow her to see what is like obviously in front of her for what they're doing. And we see that even with the other cultures. Is it the Kush? K-A?
Yeah.
And how they feel about Binti's people. Like even in this age, there's always these prejudices based on the individual cultures, and so and I definitely think it's one of those that's very challenging in that sense. That again, just kind of to confront what it is that's in front of you.
I think that's a good point. Just like that whole experience of encountering the things that you don't really realize that you do, or like think or behave or whatever, and how they can impact the people around you, and just having those experiences and taking them with grace and being willing to adjust yourself to be more respectful towards others, even when there's conflict that goes against the depths of your soul, if you will. But yeah,
I think another big thing is to note that it completely acknowledges that those who experience prejudice can carry their own. Because like the entire like, and it's something she's growing, and I think that's kind of reasonable how she kind of begins growing out of it so quickly, I think that's very reasonable, is because she's experienced it herself without realizing that she was enacting the same prejudices against the Sand People that her own tribe was experiencing from others when they visited civilization, um, and things like that.
So for me, I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle. Just reading this story with like all of the Nigerian culture and things like that, and like what Chris was saying earlier about the sand, our feelings towards sand and stuff like that, made me realize just how much representation is missing in my fiction and reading, um, to be quite honest. So I think just the existence of the series has a lot to say about race. And I think when we stay in our own little circle, we miss out on a lot of things.
Mhm.
I don't know, I just found learning about the culture to be so captivating and interesting. And yeah, it was interesting to see just a completely fresh take on sci-fi.
Yeah, definitely emphasizes how important representation, like true voice representation, is. It's not just inserting representation into settings that matter to you, but actually
Mhm.
approaching representation from the voice that they carry.
Any other thoughts on that one? Okay. I have a quote. So in Binti, we have some thoughts from Binti. She says, I shut my eyes and prayed to the seven. I wanted to ask, why did you let this happen? But that was blasphemy. You never ask why. It was not a question for you to ask. So, how in your own life have you grappled with this question, and has it changed throughout your life and faith journey?
As we've done more and more of these book clubs, I love that I can pick out like the quotes of like, oh, this is going to be a question. And so, but yeah, like for me personally, I definitely think this is something that's been a challenge. And I think especially in what I'll say is probably like North American Christianity, especially like there's very much this take on um, everything happens for a reason. Don't ask why. Like um, I once did a sermon on why Job is the worst book of the Bible because we tell the story wrong. That like we boil Job down to the beginning and the end because those are the parts that fit into our view of Christianity. Of like, oh, bad things happen, but God made it right in the end. But we throw out the whole middle where Job grapples with this question of what happened. And I think definitely as I've grown more in like myself and in my own faith, like I feel like there's been a lot more of the like, especially when it comes to a tradition, the yes, but why, or more of the like what's at the heart of something. We talked about that a bit when we did Not All Who Wander Spiritually Are Lost. We had it in that conversation. And I definitely feel like there's that side of that with this question of you can spend all of your time just assuming things happen because they happen. But when you're not willing to ask and to look into it, and from our perspective, to have doubts, like I feel like you don't always end up in the best place when you just accept that this is how it has to be.
Yeah. one of the phrases that just came to mind for me is the phrase that you see a lot in parenting, at least in North America, is because I said so. Like a lot of like when a kid pushes back and they say, why do I have to do this? And they get the answer, because I said so. And it's just this like the thing, I suppose, where like the parent doesn't feel the need to explain why they need to do something or whatever the context is. But as people, even as adults, we are naturally curious creatures, and we want to know why this thing works, why when you click these two things together do you get that response, or like the deeper, spiritual of like, why do bad things happen to good people. um we just want to know because we're curious. And I mean, I've certainly experienced that. Everyone's experienced that. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, we're never going to get all of the answers to all of our whys. And God knows that because he's God. And even if we did, we wouldn't be satisfied with those answers. I do think, though, it is also a good challenge that we give ourselves of like why, or that even God gives us, is like, why am I going through this period in my life? Of why am I experiencing this? Like, what outcome is going to come from this, and how am I going to grow as a result? And I think that's a big part of the cause and effect, is the why that we're looking for is not necessarily the why that we get, but the why that we get is often more impactful than the why we were looking for. If that makes any sense.
I think, like, in general, from, and I'm not sure if it's, I think we just in general, we try to assign meaning to events. But that meaning that we assign meaning to events selfishly, when there is a bigger picture potentially, and that's something that God will always see. But and sometimes we learn it later on. But also, like, just because, like, our faith kind of points us in a direction that everything's supposed to like have, God has an intention behind everything. And and when it comes to faith, like, the challenging why is something we sometimes don't talk about, and that's something that people, like, when people see us like from the outside, struggle with. Stephen Fry, a pretty well-known atheist, he attributes, he's like, the reason he couldn't follow religion is because childhood cancer exists. And he's like, I couldn't believe in a God that would allow that. And that is the assignment of reason to events. It's like, it's not just the nature of the universe and things, but it is definitely, it still comes from that very kind of selfish. It's why'd it happen to me? And there's not a way, like, I just, like, how do I deal with that is, I don't. I guess it I just try not to assign or overanalyze what could be the possible reason. because it is ultimately a reason I would assign to it. So the better question is, like, when something does happen that would challenge me, is how am I going to grow? How am I moving forward? Because ultimately, that's more commonly the answer. It's a chance. It's an opportunity. Like, especially from a, that's what so many people in the church would say, is an opportunity for you to grow. It's like, is it the best answer? No, but it is a way of phrasing it and putting it and thinking about it that does allow you to at least move on, because making sense of things, our brains aren't big enough yet. Okay. Maybe they're still growing.
Still working on it.
I mean, I think for most people who aren't like Chris, grappling with this question is going to happen at least once in your life. And it can be hard to come at it from a place of faith sometimes, I think, because you like Emma was saying, like, you don't necessarily get an answer, or at least not the one that you were hoping for. And then if you're placing your faith more in the outcome than in who God is, that can really shake you. So yeah, I think it's definitely okay to grapple with this question, but not to rely on the answer, because it might not come. But I think, like Binti is saying, you never ask why. Like, that's not allowed. And I like that we are allowed to. We can ask. Yeah, that just asking is not a threat.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Did you notice any other themes, biblical or otherwise, that we haven't hit on yet?
Between book 1 and book 2, so in book 1 we get the idea of we get her kind of, and it's really pronounced, like, kind of the separation of curiosity. Like, her dad tells her that curiosity is the last obstacle she needs to overcome to become a great harmonizer, and that's kind of something that we see. It's like, well, I'm acting on curiosity, I'm going to uni, I'm doing a lot of things that I'm not supposed to be doing. And then her grandmother is just like, what? Curiosity, no, that's everything. I really like that, because it's opened her, like, her curiosity is what allowed her to move forward in going with the Sand Tribe and experiencing those things. Her curiosity did take her and, like, brought her on an adventure. Very traumatizing events, but but it challenges her. I guess it's definitely allowing her to challenge the perception of what her tribe perceives as the good life of getting married and being great at this position, despite there being prejudices because you're a woman and things like that. It's like, no, this is what's expected. This is what's going to guarantee you a good life. And it's like, maybe that's not what you want. You want to learn. You want to grow and expand and see what is out there. I also found it kind of awkward that her tribe values harmony, but never sought to use that harmony to fill the void between them and the sound people. I didn't understand that.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that plays into the themes from when we discussed race earlier.
Exactly.
Is it's harmony if you stay in the system.
Yeah.
And so for themes, I've this ties in with what Chris is saying, and another one that I mean, I won't say exists. It's very much like stated is the theme of like how the small things can affect who we are. So after Binti leaves with the Sand People, the desert tribe, we get a flashback essentially to how she found her Eden. And one of my favorite, this is one of those funny quotes. So we find out what led to her going out into the desert that day to where she ended up actually being able to find it. And at the end of that section, it says, "Now here I was walking into the desert with the desert people. How different my life would have been if my parents had just let me dance." And
very much related to Church of Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it would have been choreographed, she would have been fine.
You
but
can go. It's a show with choreography. You can go.
And so
Just because it's law doesn't mean that it's fair, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that and I liked that, Emma. Just because it's law doesn't mean it's fair. But yeah,
I'm not gonna claim that I made it up myself. I got it from somewhere else, but it speaks power to me on a daily basis. So
yeah, and I think that through those little actions is what leads to her being in a position where she's willing to leave. That's kind of her first taste of, or that first one that we see of her understanding that things exist outside of this bigger world, or in this bigger world, and accepting that she, like through that curiosity, that she can be a part of them. And so it's like that's that small act of what could have been a good thing of her finding out what her role could be in her tribe, but then the consequences of that lead to her finding this life-altering thing, and then learning about who she is.
I like the sort of theme that comes up a couple of times with like friendships or relationships or connections in unexpected places. Because you see it a couple of times with the Sandy tribe and the jellyfish, and again, sort of how I filed them away in my brain, but they're just unexpected friendships and connections in unexpected places. Like you wouldn't expect to find a friendship in this place, but then you give it a try, and like, or it's like terrifying and a terrible scenario to be stuck in, and you come out the other side having gained something from it. So
All right. Anything else that stood out to you, or any quotes that you didn't get to share yet?
Got one more quote. And this is, I think it's one of those very interesting. Again, to me, this is one of those like small clips that stood out. And I think that it very much talks to Binti's character. And so this is when she's on the way back home, and she's on the space fish. Space fish. And it goes, most were not allowed to enter the spaces. Talking about the oxygen rooms. Most were not allowed to enter the spaces for more than a highly monitored few minutes. But my unique status, or my unique hero status, got me whatever I wanted, including unlimited breathing room time. And I just love that is how she uses her status, is I just want to chill in this room and meditate and have time to
Be
myself.
left alone.
Makes you wonder
Right.
what's actually being pumped into those rooms.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's all
Yeah.
legal around the world by then, you know.
Yeah. You know.
But yeah, I like that quote again. I like a lot of. I feel like there's a lot more of that in Home, but there's a lot more of those like quippy little like this isn't supposed to be a joke, but it's funny.
Yeah.
And so that was one that like stood out to me as I was reading.
Yep. I had one too. That was one that I had marked down, Cameron. But I'll have one from the first one. Binti and Oku are talking, and Oku says, "I wish I could just kill you." I paused. Like my mother always says, "We all wish for many things," I said, touching a last bit of fish in my back tooth. Just very simple, like it's just a sentence that isn't finished. We all wish for many things. And it's just a bit of, it gives you a bit of an insight into who Binti is and sort of how she was raised, and like just that, like, we all wish for things. So I see your wish, but I have a wish too. And like, doesn't mean you're gonna get it. So yeah.
Right, to wrap it up, it was announced that a Binti series is in development at Hulu.
Don't mess it up.
What are your hopes?
So to our earlier conversation, I really want to see how they're going to represent treeing.
Oh.
Like what that's going to look like. And then towards the end of Home, we get some explanations for how people with that ability see things.
The Matrix.
And so I'm very, very curious if we're going to be getting that throughout. Like, are we going to basically be seeing math everywhere? Or is it going to
like
just
that
be
meme of the woman with just all the little
Yes,
math,
exactly.
You know.
Is that like, are we going to get that? I'm very hopeful too for how we get.
I'm guessing
Oku.
it's just a throwback to the Matrix.
Yes, it's just all raining.
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful how we get Oku represented as well. I definitely feel like through Binti, I didn't quite understand what Oku was. And then once we got to Home, it's like, oh, it's a jellyfish. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I'm very interested to see how that's going to be represented. And especially how they're going to attack or represent, or how they're going to represent the attack of the Great Wave, of them killing most of the humans on the ship. And so I'm very hopeful for how they'll bring that in, and if they'll bring in like that isolation feel that we get.
It's going to be the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
Recreation.
Yeah.
I'm honestly just excited to see the level of diversity. I hope that they take it into the production crew. That's my big hope and dream and desire as someone who exists in that world. Is seeing that extend beyond the on-screen people into the people behind the cameras and in all of the departments. Just because there's so much potential with this world and universe and all of that, that they can do so well with, that it's an opportunity for Hulu to employ people of color and different identities other than white old males. So
yeah, I have no idea. Just want to see the fish.
yeah.
Yeah, the fish.
And then it's going to make me wonder what it tastes like. That's what's going through my head right now.
Space salmon.
It's like they're gonna show it, and then I'm gonna be like, I wonder if that tastes good.
I don't know. For me, I am also just excited to see Okwu. I have a picture of him in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Basically just a jellyfish. So I'm interested.
I like to think they're the big ol' man of war jellyfish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
but like purpley instead of orange.
I also picture some of the other species being just like giant, like a giant praying mantis. One of the very quick descriptions, I'm like, it's like that's what just praying mantis in a suit.
Business mantis.
Business mantis, yeah.
Can't unsee it now.
All right. Will you be reading more in this series or more by Nnedi Okorafor?
Yeah, I would.
For me, I definitely want to finish the Binti stuff, especially since I have the trilogy +1, and so I definitely want to go back and read that. And then, kind of just as like doing prep for tonight, I also realized that Nnedi wrote Black Panther: Long Live the King, which is a run of Black Panther that I've heard very good things about, and so I will probably also be picking that up. I think it's a 6 episode or 6 book run, and so I think I'm going to pick that up and read that. So
No, it sounded like I was super critical of this, but I have to finish it. It's like I have my criticisms, but I'm enjoying it. It's good. It's been great. It's just I'm just a little more idealistic in my perceptions of the future. That's all. That's
Fair.
it.
I'm also excited to finish the trilogy for sure. And I would read more by her.
Mm-hmm.
Quite enjoyed it.
I want her to do an epic series now, though.
Yeah.
Like full on world building. Tell me the distance. Even if it like go
Fill
back in
all
time
of
this
the
time. It's
beans.
easier. It's like,
Fill all of it.
just do a epic prequel.
Super in depth.
The history
super
of the Sand
detailed.
People. Literally write it like a historic book.
A
Like just a
prequel
record
trilogy.
of history.
Yeah, I feel about this very similar to how I felt about Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, where like coming out of that one of my big hopes is that I hoped that she would write something similar but different, in the sense that I wanted to it's Flora Bradley. I wanted her to take on like a more adult themed mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of to the point y'all are making, that was kind of my same feel here of I very much want to see her take on a bit more of a, or even again, if it is Binti, like a kind of like what we had with The Witcher as well.
Narration or something.
Yeah, like, where we have a set of short stories that are then collected, but then we eventually get novels. There's something similar there that I would really enjoy if we were to actually get a full-on Binti novel.
Yeah. All right. Any other final thoughts?
What does Okwu taste like?
Oh.
Feel like that's on me for asking.
You set them up and then
Sorry, I haven't eaten yet.
It's showing, Chris. It's showing.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this up. Get Chris some dinner. Next book club will be on March 31st, and we'll be reading Tales and Typos by J.E. Tankersley. This is a recent release, and it is a collection of short stories inspired by the playing of tabletop RPGs.
Woo!
Yay.
I'm excited. It sounds delightful.
Yeah.
This is in the list of things I was not aware existed, and then you brought this up for book club, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Same here.
Yep.
I just do what I'm told.
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
It's Chapel all over again.
All right.
So happy to be here, guys. Because it's true.
It's nice because I don't have to decide on what book to get. I'm told, like, and then I enjoy it.
I always ask.
Yep.
I know. You just tell me, Shanine. That's why I don't respond. It's just like, sure. You just let me know.
All right.
I suffer greatly from decision paralysis.
Noted.
So I leave decisions to others.
Relate.
I just feel like Shanine's the expert. So
Exactly. That's why you're the
All
host.
I am comfortable making executive decisions for book club.
I
Because my
mean, we appreciate you.
my
Yep.
TBR is longer than I am. So thank you, Emma. All right. We are First Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come chat with us on our Discord server. Check out our cool Redbubble store and giant squids and all that. Email us at onestgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on our Twitch and find all the videos on our YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out the show notes on our website, onegeek411.com. You can hit me up at at Hoot and Howl Tales on Instagram and the Hoot and Howl on Twitter.
And that's Tales, Tales.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because we've got weird spellings in this group. You can find me on all platforms as I am not prepared with an I instead of the normal way of spelling prepared.
Then I'm Humar Whittle.
And I'm not so foreign. That's NOTSO, the number 4 EIGN. Because it's Lee.
Read a book.
Eat some fish.
I love you. Just don't eat the fish while you're on it. That's how you don't arrive.
You don't want to kill it. I wonder if it's possible to just